The night shift at St. Haver's Hospital was silent except for the soft hum of machines. Dr. Daniel Hayes, only 28, was on his third consecutive night duty. Exhausted, he pushed his cart quietly through the dim corridor until he reached room 314. Inside lay Eleanor Vale, once one of the most powerful women in the country, now a motionless figure under white sheets. She had been in a coma for months after a car accident that had taken everything but her heartbeat. Daniel checked her chart. Everything looked the same as yesterday. He had changed her bandages dozens of times, but something about this woman always made him pause. Her face, even pale and still, carried both strength and sadness. The staff often called her the Ice Queen, but Daniel had read about her, how she built orphanages, paid for hospital wings, and secretly funded scholarships for poor kids. Maybe she wasn't as cold as they thought. As he replaced the dressing on her arm, he spoke softly. "Miss Vale, it's me again. The night doctor no one sees." He smiled to himself. "You probably don't hear me, but that's okay. You look stronger tonight." He had begun talking to her weeks ago, not because he expected a response, but because silence was heavier than exhaustion. Sometimes, he'd tell her stories about his childhood in a poor town, about how his mother worked 3 jobs to pay for his medical school. Other nights, he'd hum old songs his grandmother used to sing. That night, as he finished his routine, he gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "You know, if you wake up," he whispered, "you might hate the world you build, but maybe you'll also find someone new to build it with." He didn't realize the heart monitor's rhythm had subtly changed. The next morning, nurses found Daniel asleep in the chair beside her bed, still holding her chart. One of them gasped, "Doctor." Her fingers moved. Daniel shot up, rubbing his eyes. "What did you say?" She moved her hand, the nurse repeated. He leaned closer. "Miss Vale, Eleanor." He waited. For a moment, nothing. Then, faintly, her eyelids trembled. The nurse ran to call the head physician, but Daniel just froze, watching as her lips tried to form a sound. Hours later, Eleanor's room was filled with specialists and executives. They surrounded her like she was an artifact brought back from another time. But when she opened her eyes fully, the first person she looked for was not a surgeon or a chairman, it was Daniel. Her voice was barely audible. "Who are you?" "I'm Daniel," he said softly. "You've been asleep for a long time." She blinked slowly, her eyes searching his face. "I heard you." The room went quiet. "What?" one of the nurses asked. "I heard him talking," she murmured weakly. "Every night. About his mother, about his songs." Her voice cracked. "You kept me alive." Daniel swallowed hard, trying to stay professional. "I just did my job, ma'am." But she smiled faintly. "No, you did more than that." In the days that followed, Eleanor's recovery became a media sensation. Billionaires sent flowers. Reporters crowded the hospital gates. But inside that room, she refused interviews and asked only for Daniel. When he entered, she asked him to sit beside her like before. "You know," she said softly, "I spent my life surrounded by people who wanted my wealth, my name, or my power. But when I was nothing, not even awake, you still talked to me." "I didn't expect anything," he said. "I just didn't want you to feel alone." Tears welled in her eyes. "No one has ever said that to me." As weeks passed, she learned to walk again. Daniel helped her practice, his hands steady at her back. Sometimes she'd stumble, and he'd laugh quietly. "You're doing great, Eleanor." One afternoon, she told him she wanted to see the hospital garden. When they reached it, the wind brushed through her hair. "Daniel," she said, "when I was unconscious, I kept hearing your stories. I think that's what brought me back." He smiled. Then maybe it wasn't medicine. Maybe it was hope. Months later, Eleanor Vale announced that she would step down from her company's board. Instead, she donated a large portion of her fortune to open a medical scholarship fund, under one condition: it would be named the Hayes Foundation, after the doctor who believed in talking to patients who couldn't talk back. During the opening ceremony, cameras flashed, but Daniel stayed at the back of the crowd, uncomfortable with the attention. After her speech, Eleanor walked straight to him and whispered, "This is your doing. You didn't just heal me. You reminded me that hearts can wake up too." Daniel smiled. "You gave me hope too, Eleanor." The world saw it as a story of miracle recovery. But for the two of them, it was something deeper, a quiet reminder that even in silence, kindness can reach through darkness and wake something that medicine never could, the will to live again. The night before Eleanor was discharged, the hospital was quiet again, just like the night Daniel first spoke to her. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. Daniel stood outside her room, holding the file that had once been filled with hopeless charts and fading vitals. Now it was full of progress notes and recovery milestones, the proof of a miracle. He hesitated before entering, unsure if she'd want company. But when he gently pushed open the door, Eleanor was sitting up, gazing out the window. Her hair was shorter now, her skin pale but glowing with life. "You always come when the world is asleep," she said quietly, not turning to look at him. He smiled. "Maybe I just like the calm. Or maybe you're afraid of being seen," she said, finally facing him with a knowing look. "You hide behind your kindness, Daniel. I can see that now." He laughed softly. "Maybe, but I think that's better than hiding behind power." Her eyes softened. "Touché." They both fell into silence for a moment, the sound of rain filling the space between them. Then Eleanor spoke again, her voice fragile but sure. "Do you believe people get second chances?" Daniel nodded. "Every day. That's what medicine is, giving people chances the world thought they'd lost." "And what about you?" she asked. "What second chance would you take if you could?" He looked down at his hands. "My mother died before she could see me graduate. I always thought if I could have one more day with her, I'd tell her that her sacrifices were worth it." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "She'd be proud. I think she already knows." He met her gaze. "And you? What would you do differently?" Her lips trembled slightly. "I spent my whole life running an empire, but I never stopped to build a home. I built towers, but no one waited for me inside them." She paused. "When I woke up and saw your face, I thought maybe God gave me a chance to build something real, even if it's not made of glass and steel." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. "You already started. That scholarship fund will change hundreds of lives." She smiled faintly. "I didn't mean that kind of building." He looked at her quietly, understanding the weight of what she meant, but too humble to respond. The next morning, the hospital entrance was surrounded by reporters again. Cameras clicked as Eleanor stepped out, supported by Daniel. She wore a simple beige coat, nothing like the designer outfits that used to define her. The press shouted her name, but she only smiled politely and whispered to Daniel, "It feels strange to walk out of here alive." He chuckled. "You earned it." She turned to him. "Promise me something, anything. Never stop talking to your patients, even the ones who can't answer." He nodded. "I won't. And never let the world make you cold. You're different, Daniel. Don't let them take that away from you." A week later, Daniel received a letter. It was handwritten, sealed with gold wax. "Dear Daniel, you once said you wished for one more day with your mother. I can't give you that, but I can give you a lifetime of days helping others in her name. The Foundation's first full medical wing will bear her name, the Clara Hayes Pavilion. It's being built in your hometown. I hope you'll visit it, or maybe run it. With gratitude, Eleanor Vale." He stared at the letter for a long time. There were no words big enough to hold what he felt: gratitude, disbelief, warmth, maybe something deeper he couldn't name. Months passed. Daniel moved to his mother's old town, now home to the new pavilion. It wasn't long before the opening day came, and as he gave the first tour to a group of young students, a familiar voice behind him said, "You still talk too much when you're nervous." He turned around. Eleanor stood there, radiant, a soft smile on her face. "Eleanor," he whispered, stunned. "You came. I told you," she said. "You gave me back my life. The least I could do is visit the one who reminded me what it means to live." They walked through the new corridors together. Photos of medical students lined the walls, many from humble families, their futures now shining because of the fund she created. At the end of the hallway, a plaque caught his eye. "Dedicated to those who heal not just with hands, but with heart." Daniel turned to her, his voice low. "You didn't have to put that. I wanted to," she said. "Because that's what you did for me." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The sun broke through the windows, bathing them in light. Two souls who met in the stillness of a hospital room now stood surrounded by life, and every heartbeat, every voice around them, was proof of what compassion can awaken. The world would never know the whole story. It didn't need to. Because some miracles don't make headlines, they live quietly between two people who dared to care when no one else did. And for Daniel and Eleanor, that was enough.